Hello and welcome to From A to Z Azure Virtual Conference in this session on why move to the cloud. My name is Dwayne Natwick. I am a Microsoft Azure MVP, Microsoft Certified Trainer, as well as hold multiple Azure and Microsoft 365 certifications, and you can follow me on the social media links provided on this slide. So what are we going to talk about in this session? We are going to start and talk about why are we moving to the cloud? Why do we want to adopt cloud services, and why would we choose Microsoft Azure? We're going to talk about core capabilities of the cloud and some common misconceptions to adopting cloud services. Finally, we will talk about what's in it for me? What's in it for you to move to the cloud, and what would be some of those next steps to take in your cloud adoption journey? So, why the cloud and why Microsoft Azure? So there are many things around moving to the cloud and why we would want to move to the cloud. We want to think about what our value proposition is and what are our organizational goals and motivating factors. What we need to make sure that we avoid is making sure that we avoid any lack of clarity and alignment. That's going to lead to debate and different opinions and lack of focus. You need to have your goals in place and everybody from a business and technical perspective going in the same direction and understanding what the motivations are for each before you determine moving to the cloud. And as part of the A to Z conference, there is a session that I'm providing on the cloud adoption framework for Azure, which goes into a little bit more detail around these motivating factors. But the key thing is to avoid this tug of war that might take place between the business units, the business executives, the business decision makers and stakeholders, and the technical stakeholders, because they have different motivations and there's different motivating factors. And if we don't have a focused strategy and focused reason aligned between those areas, it is not going to be a successful move to the cloud. And your strategy should be very explicit, and your team should be clear on that strategy. It should be documented, it should be agreed upon, and you should adhere to it as you move to the cloud. So what are some of the motivating factors and value to moving to the cloud? And we have multiple areas here of what some of those motivating factors are. Are we moving for a cost reason, to potentially save money, or are we trying to move from making a capital expense and avoid the need to invest in new equipment or licensing and then move to the cloud for an operational expense and OpEx change? What are we looking to be more agile? Do we want to provide a higher level of service quality and scalability and elasticity to our applications? Do we want to add new capabilities that are going to be that aren't cost effective to invest in from an organizational standpoint? And as you look at this slide and you see, we have our cost driver here, which is going to save money, but that agility, being more cloud native or utilizing cloud native capabilities, is going to help organizations to make money, to be more efficient, to be more effective, to reach more customers, and to increase revenues. And then that service quality piece is going to help us to reduce the risks, reduce our levels of risk, build higher levels of security and compliance, scalability, reliability, things that are a major struggle in an on-premises workflow infrastructure environment. The cloud helps to build higher levels of service quality that we may not be able to do without a high level of cost on a service quality perspective. So why would we move to Azure? Obviously there are multiple cloud providers out there. There is AWS, there's Google Cloud Platform, there's Oracle has a cloud platform, IBM Cloud. We have multiple cloud providers out there that offer and bring different capabilities to the table. So why Microsoft Azure? Why would we choose to move to Microsoft Azure? Some key points that I believe and are driving factors for Azure are security across hybrid infrastructures. Microsoft has embraced hybrid infrastructures from a private cloud perspective for your own data between Azure and your own data center, as well as the multi-cloud approach with AWS and GCP and other clouds, being able to integrate all of that into the Azure platform to manage security with things such as Azure Arc and Microsoft Defender for Cloud and Microsoft Sentinel. You can utilize those tools within Azure for the entire hybrid infrastructure. Integrated identity and access management. Azure Active Directory has a very consistent approach to identity and access management for hybrid infrastructures that utilize Active Directory within a Active Directory domain service on premises. You can tie that into Azure Active Directory very easily. Scalable global platforms for applications and databases. They have Microsoft Azure has very scalable database platforms with SQL database as well as Cosmos DB, and a scalable app service that can be delivered on a global scale with traffic management and Azure front door capabilities for routing traffic to the closest region to your users to decrease latency and increase availability to those users. And again, monitoring and management, very similar to what I was saying around security. The capabilities around Azure Arc for hybrid infrastructures that tie into Azure Monitor within the Azure environment provide an Azure and log analytics capabilities, allow you to monitor all your resources across your entire infrastructure. So as we move to the cloud, let's some things to think about and some things to note are some of the core capabilities and some common misconceptions as we move to the cloud. And one of those was on a slide a couple of moments ago is that we make some mistakes around thinking that we're going to save money and we're going to just drop into the cloud and it's going to be a cost saving. We're going to increase our cost of ownership, and it's going to immediately make an impact from a cost perspective, a cost savings perspective. We can't treat the cloud like that, and just treating it as a lift and shift technology swap from our virtual machines on a VMware environment in our data center over to Azure virtual machines is going to make a huge impact. It could help us. We don't have to increase in our costs. We have more scalability and storage. We have more capabilities from a geographic perspective to increase our use and our utilization of cloud services and reach more and broaden our reach to customers. But we can't do doing a one-to-one technology swap is not going to make a huge impact in moving to the cloud. What we want to do is we want to think about it in a different mindset. We want to understand that on premises we are provisioning based on and building our infrastructure based on peak demand, and that is not cost effective, because when you think about it, that you need maybe peak peak demand, peak performance at limited amounts of time during the year. So you have this mentality in place that you need this amount of resources to meet our maximum demand, and we're running in a lot of cases around 25% of that demand majority of the year. So we have a lot of unused resources. Everything's always on. It's fixed in size. We're configuring everything very manually in a lot of cases. We need to order equipment months before we need it. And we're really hoarding resources, right? We're running those resources. We're running that infrastructure to its untimely end. In most cases, we generally aren't going to be purchasing equipment and before we need it. We're going to wait until a server fails, and then we're going to have to hustle to replace it or to repurpose resources within our environment. It's not very productive. It's not very conducive in a lot of cases to innovation. And when we move into Azure, we can change that mindset by utilizing resources as we need it, which helps us in terms of managing our costs on a monthly basis. We only pay for what we use, so we don't have to use resources at our peak demand forecast. We can utilize what we need when we need it, and scale up and scale down, or scale in and scale out as required. And when I'm talking about scaling up or scaling down or scaling in and scaling out, when we scaling up or down is we can add resources to a single virtual machine and go up and down. We can increase the amount of virtual CPUs and virtual RAM on those virtual machines as they need, and we can decrease it as demand decreases. Or we can scale in and out, where we are adding duplicate resources and we're utilizing scale sets to add virtual machines to our resources as needed. And you can see those in the graphic here on the slide. Rather than having a bunch of servers here that are web servers within our environment that are on the left, we can have one web server, and we can then scale it out and increase the use of that as we continue along and continue to need. We just finished the holiday season, and we might have used for the 3 months of November, December, and January a lot higher capacity need for purchases and for returns than we may have the other 9 months of the year. Another common mistake, and I hit on this a little bit in terms of that whole whole duplication of resources, is that you should not expect an immediate cost reduction for moving to the cloud. Moving to the cloud is really about scalability, flexibility, and performance, as I pointed out in the previous slide. You have ways that we can continue to evaluate our resources and decrease costs of our resources, but that's not going to happen overnight. And that's a common misconception in moving to the cloud, is that we are going to immediately save money, because and in a way you are, if for some reason you have a $100,000, $200,000 capital expenditure on new equipment that's coming in, or you're renewing a lease on a data center that you can get rid of by moving to the cloud. Those are some hard costs that you can save. But from a standpoint of operationally, you're going to save money moving to the cloud. That's again a misconception. But over time, you can certainly make adjustments to your approach for use of cloud services, and you can also rehost and change the manner and re-platform your services within the Azure environment that will help to increase performance as well as possibly decrease costs. Key points here on this slide are out why cloud projects fail. And we hit on this a little bit in the first couple of slides, where in that tug of war, if we're not aligned from a technical perspective and a business strategy perspective, you're going to fail. You need to understand what the impact's going to be, recognize what value is going to be delivered, and communicate that to the business, and understand what the expectations are, having realistic expectations, making sure the business that you communicate to the business as well as the technical, what those expectations are, and understand overall the organizational dynamics. Who's pulling the strings, so to speak, in terms of why we're moving to the cloud, and what is the reason for that decision being made. Some other key things from a technical perspective: not having a good timeline or estimating budget correctly, starting from scratch and not taking into account and doing proper planning. Failure to plan is a plan to fail. We need to make sure that we're aligning our organization, our business strategy, our technical strategies, and why we are building. What we're doing to build a approach and a plan and phased approach to going to the cloud. We don't want to start from scratch. Utilize the resources that are available to you for assessing and planning a cloud adoption framework. Again, referencing another session that I'm providing. Utilizing those resources, understanding best practices, and taking those into account are very important. Applying on-premises controls to the public cloud are another thing that might not work. You might come into licensing issues. Those on-premises controls aren't built necessarily for the cloud and aren't optimized for the cloud. You look for utilizing cloud native tools and adapting those on-premises controls into those cloud native controls. For example, there's a lot of tie-ins within Microsoft Sentinel from a security approach to bring those controls and monitor those controls within Microsoft Sentinel. And you can continue to utilize those on-premises controls for your on-premises resources and bring those in to the operations of your cloud environment. Skills gap, the lack of skills and talent could cause some issues and be why projects fail as well. There is a difference in skill set to manage, monitor, and migrate to the cloud effectively than there is on premises. So if somebody understands VMware and vCenter, that skill set does not fully migrate itself to a cloud skill. So having your team properly skilled on how to migrate, monitor, and manage resources within the cloud are very important. So, and there's a lot of training out there through Microsoft Learn and through learning partners such as Opsagility that you can work on filling that skills gap. And as you build those cloud skills, it's important, a good place to go if you're a large organization and continue your cloud native maturity level is to build a cloud center of excellence that manages those cloud skills, manages all of that, the baseline and the cloud processes and infrastructure deployment capabilities is an important piece to most large organizations. And again, I'll actually be providing a session on building a cloud center of excellence as part of this conference as well. Key point at the bottom of the slide is projects rarely fail because of technology. It's not technology that's going to cause a project to fail. It's all of these bullets on here. It's scope creep and having not having proper strategy, planning, and governance over those projects that's going to cause them to fail. Key thing here is really the cloud really changes everything within your organization. It changes the dynamic of your organization. It transforms your organization because you have a lot more capabilities and effectiveness, and can, if you utilize the cloud correctly, a higher speed to market for new applications and new services than you have in building that in an on-premises infrastructure. You can plan, provision, and manage compute and storage capacity on a very dynamic and fast basis. Your application architecture and development changes. Again, you start building things to a cloud-native architecture. You have a much larger breadth of networking, of deployment and monitoring. You have at your disposal high availability services, disaster recovery and backup services already ready to go without you having to build them yourselves. We have the high levels of performance and scalability, service level agreements within Azure, compliance capabilities, security controls that are native to most, if not all, of the services within Azure are all there and can very easily get you to a compliance level if you need to, and build and help you on that journey rather than having to build and purchase more compliance controls for your environment within your on-premises environment, and budgeting and cost control. And the reason behind that and that bullet that's different is your budget and cost control within the Azure environment versus an on-premises environment. You have your obviously capital expenses of your data center and all of your equipment within your private data centers. You can budget for depreciation and have that all on your balance sheet from that standpoint. Within the Azure environment, you have the capabilities in terms of policies and having policies in place to govern and to budget for what resources you're going to utilize within Azure and what resources you're going to allow, where resources are going to be allowed in terms of regions based on where your organization's offices are, and ways to control costs with reserved instances, with platform-based services, with scaling up and scaling down resources as needed, or auto shutdown of resources from a development standpoint when you aren't utilizing those resources or working on those resources, all help you with the cost control. And there are recommendations throughout Azure Advisor. From a security standpoint, we have Microsoft Defender for Cloud to provide levels of recommendations on how to be more efficient and effective within your Azure environment. So key question you always need to ask yourself in terms of when you're moving and looking to adopt cloud-based services is, what's in it for me? What does Azure bring to you, and how can it help your business? Again, I've pointed this out: decreasing hardware expense, getting out of the real estate of a data center and the cost of making capital expenditures and depreciating that hardware and paying rent for a building that houses all of this equipment. And maybe it's not just housing that equipment. Maybe you're using a coloc facility where you're renting space and rack space within another company's data center. is that cost effective to your organization to have that on your balance sheet, or can you move to utilizing Azure services, Azure equipment, and just have an operational expense such as your cable bill and your broadband? Rapid deployment to meet customer demand. I've hit on this already, and we'll talk again about it on the next slide. Again, on how that, this is the big driver here, and how this is going to help you is if, especially if you have a website that you host within your private data center, how do you handle increased demand, and do you get beyond your capacity at certain times of year, where you might be in a position where you should buy more new equipment? Pay for what you use. Azure, you only pay for what you use. You pay for what you have turned on at the time, and what is being what is going across the network out of Azure to your customers, or to your internal or external customers. You can scale to meet your customer demand faster. If you need more resources, you can bring those resources on board much quicker. You have more team focused time for development than managing an infrastructure. So this is that speed to market in applications. Having the ability to do more development, build new applications, build new services for your customers to consume, again, increasing revenue to your organization. And we showed this slide already, but just to kind of reiterate this slide and what this, now that we understand what it means to you, this is how this slide dictates what the benefit is from moving from an on-premises mindset to an Azure mindset. You only consume what you pay for. There's no lead time, and you have the ability to automate all of this. So if demand increases on this virtual machine, you can turn another virtual machine on using automation without any operational intervention, again, to continue then that those resources within your IT can then work on more development of new applications. And we have an IT culture change then. We have our legacy IT culture and your cloud IT culture. So what's in it for you here is evolution. You're getting into more cross-functional teams. You are having a results-driven organization to deliver and make an impact on your organization. So your IT, rather than being somebody that's keeping and controlling the environment and making sure that everything stays available, stays online, and really providing support for resources and help desk support when something goes wrong. We now have a cloud culture where we are challenging our IT organization to deliver customer value and impact. A lot more development and cross-functional work environment. More learning and moving quickly and more rapid-paced. Your IT becomes a more rapid-paced organization, becomes more of a impact to your bottom line and to your revenue rather than a cost to your bottom line. And I mentioned the cloud adoption framework for Azure is a framework that was built by Microsoft for best practices and for adopting the cloud. And it's really a workflow standpoint where it brings together and hopefully addresses the aspects of why projects fail and takes you on your journey across working with your business and technical stakeholders to define your strategy, plan where you're going as an organization, and then gets you to a point where you build your readiness, you build your base infrastructure, your base network landing zone with proper blueprints and governance methodology for security and best practices within your organization as you adopt then and move workloads to Azure through either migrating them, which is more of that lift and shift, which it may be good for initial impact of moving moving applications that are on old hardware and old operating systems to the Azure environment. Or you can start to innovate, where now you're refactoring, you're re-architecting your applications into the cloud in a more of a DevOps approach. Generally, most organizations are going to start with that migrate approach, finding some early adopting workloads that can just be moved and rehosted into Azure. Maybe they're re-platformed to a certain degree, and then you start to then innovate through your cloud maturity model as you become more cloud native and you have built those skill sets. You can then do more innovation out there. Then you look at what you need to do from a managed standpoint, building those commitments, building that maturity, building in that operations to monitor and manage, and govern fits within there as well. And all of that fits into the well-architected framework as well. That falls as a companion piece really to the cloud adoption framework, where we're looking at cost optimization, operational excellence, performance efficiency, reliability, security. And if anybody's ever been within Azure and has looked at Azure Advisor, those little pillars there within well-architected framework actually are the same components and recommendations you get in Azure Advisor as you bring in resources into the Azure environment. You get recommendations on how you can manage and monitor and make your environment more effective for those well-architected pillars. So finally, let's talk about next steps as we close this out. So we've talked about what are the drivers, where projects fail, why what's in it for you, why you would think about moving to the Azure cloud. So what do you need to do next, and how do you get started? Cloud adoption framework and looking at the cloud adoption framework and viewing my session on the cloud adoption framework would be a helpful way to understand where you can get some links and going on Microsoft for that. But really, first and foremost, what you need to do is think about the motivations. And this is really where you define your strategy within the cloud adoption framework anyway. You in the motivation, you think about, what your requirements are, why are you motivated to go to the cloud, and then determine, what your plan is and how you're going to ready yourself for the cloud as you build then and then start to migrate. And we have we build our migration strategy. We start to migrate workloads to the cloud, and then from there we start to mature within the cloud. And this is really a cyclical aspect of determining in waves what our stages are going to be, and then really returning back to the top and finding more workloads and finding more waves as part of that plan. So you build a plan that's built around that motivation, and then you continue to migrate, and you continue to mature how you're migrating as you go through. And some of those motivations and those motivating factors are, and some of the short-term ways to identify workloads to go to the cloud is really, do we have hardware in our data center that's been depreciated that we need to replace? Is it no longer meeting our customer demand at peak performance where we're going to have to upgrade? Do we have licensing requirements that we're going to have to purchase more licensing for a new operating system? Do we have capacity challenges? Again, is our storage devices at maximum capacity? Are we having issues with our databases? And what do we need to do? And how do we plan plan our strategy and get that ready for that migration and that adoption. And again, business, it's all about business stakeholders, technical stakeholders, and user stakeholders all getting together, along with even our legal and HR and all of that, to understand what the drivers are going to be and what we're going to migrate, and plan those waves. Again, so we're gonna plan those waves, and we're going to plan and ready and migrate, and we're going to identify what we need to do. Initially, is what is that initial workload going to look like? What's ready now? And really, in terms of our first next steps is, what can we rehost? And again, it goes back to that motivation of, do we have hardware that's depreciated, and we need to move that to either new hardware and new operating systems, or we can move that to Azure. We can rehost that very easily on Azure virtual machines and be ready to go. And we can do that lighthouse migration of a single application to adopt our cloud services and utilize Azure. We create our landing zone, which is our governance infrastructure for our network and our security and our policies and all of that, for how we're going to create, what our baseline is going to be across our organization is within that landing zone, and what we're going to utilize there. And then we start to then mature, and what we're going to do, what we're going to do in terms of license optimization, app modernization, replatforming. Example here is we move a SQL database, a SQL Server database, into a virtual machine within Azure. We get that in, we get the application in. Now we think about what we can do to replatform that. Can we replatform that on Azure SQL database, or on Cosmos, or utilize Cosmos DB from a global architecture perspective? How do we modernize our applications and use more app services, and utilize maybe container-based compute services, optimizing our licensing by from our enterprise agreements, and bringing those licenses that we already own to decrease our costs, or do we change how we're doing our licensing? Again, SQL database is a prime example here of where we can possibly do some license optimization by utilizing less CPUs and less processors to decrease our license cost for SQL databases. So these are all things that we, as we go about our adoption and our move to the Azure cloud, we think about these things, and these are our first next steps, really. And then you go back up to the top and pick another workload and continue to move to additional workloads and get more cloud native, and start to maybe re-architect and redesign applications as you go through the different phases and the maturity to becoming a cloud native organization. And this ends this session. I want to thank you very much for attending. We went through why you would move to the cloud and why you would choose Microsoft Azure. We talked about some core capabilities of utilizing Azure and some common misconceptions in your move to the cloud. We then discussed what's in it for you. What benefits do you have to moving to Azure, and some approaches and ways for next steps to how to adopt cloud services and adopt Microsoft Azure. So I want to thank you for attending the A to Z Azure virtual conference. I will stay online till the top of the hour for any additional questions within the live Q&A. And again, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me on social media as well. I want to thank you again for attending the A to Z Azure Virtual Conference, and hope you are enjoying it, and hope to see you attending some of my other sessions in this conference as well as others. Thank you very much. Have a great day.